Hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. My name is Brandon, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. The mission of Free State Colorado is to promote a culture of liberty, freedom of the individual, and a free market. Today, I'm joined by one of the hardest working liberty activists in Colorado, Natalie Menten. Natalie's illustrious career began when she started involving herself in political projects when she was 19. She served on the RTD board for 8 years, where she was known for the amount of times she voted no. She spearheaded the repeal of the grocery tax in Lakewood. She's currently a board director at the Tabor Foundation and Tabor Committee. She received the Vern Bickle Award for Grassroots Leadership from the Independence Institute and has been a primary petition gatherer for recent ballot initiatives. Whether it's lowering the state income tax, fighting against government growth, or working to hold politicians accountable, Natalie usually has a clipboard on the passenger seat in her car. Natalie, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks, I'm pleased to be here.
Well, Natalie, let's start with the ballot initiatives that we're facing this year. Can you give us a broad overview of what Coloradans are seeing on their ballot?
Yes, so what you are seeing is, first of all, these are our 3 citizen-initiated issues. 2 of these I am in favor of and 1 against. So let's start with the one, first of all, that is the easiest for me to explain. It's a no vote, and that's on Proposition 119. 119 is coined as LEAP, which is about the Learning Opportunities Program. Now, there are many of us who would like to see a change in how public dollars for education are spent. But that doesn't mean bringing in new dollars, especially if they tax just a small section of the population. And that's what occurs with LEAP. And one of the reasons, there's multiple, but one of the reasons I'm opposed to it. And what LEAP does is it increases the tax on marijuana by 5%, which is adult behavioral tax to start with. And besides that being just a small set, I mean, why should marijuana, adult marijuana users be the only ones to fund this program? To me, that's illogical. The money should be coming within those existing resources and going to these after-school programs that they want to create within this ballot issue. Secondly, there is some money coming from the land board trust, which is land that's been donated to the state, and it would take a portion of that money from the proceeds and use that. But that's really a small portion compared to the marijuana tax. There are other problems with the issue, and that is, 1, the board that would control the money is appointed. They're not elected. So having them answer to us, the public, makes it much more challenging because they don't have the pressure. They're appointed. We don't have that oversight. Those are 2 of the biggest reasons why, personally, I will be strongly against Proposition 119, which has to do with the education money and additional taxes. And the more that we take from people, you talked about freedom, the more that we're taking out of their pocket, the less freedom they have to lead their lives. So that's the first issue. Is there anything you wanted me to cover more on that one?
No, I completely agree with you on that. I think it's an outrageous assault on the cannabis industry, which has been kind of the piggy bank for a lot of these special projects and special funding that the politicians and the legislator have been working on. And I know there's at least one state rep, great guy, Representative Stan Sandridge, and he made this point. He's a former law enforcement officer, and he says, hey, you keep raising the price of legal marijuana, we're just going to create the black market again. You're just going to incentivize people to start doing this illegally and get it out of the government's control. So, it's a great point. 5% here, 5% there. It's going to keep adding up. And all of a sudden, the legal cannabis industry is not going to be able to compete with the black market industry. So, you can only tax this industry so far before people start looking at alternatives if the price is too high. I mean, we've seen that in California. I think that's an important consideration. And of course, yeah, it's silly. The government's taking so much money, more than they ever have before. And if this project, this LEAP program, is so important to them, then I'm sure they can come up with a way to pay for it outside of creating new taxes.
I agree 100%. And we're talking about the state issues right now, but I can say just within Jefferson County, there's at least 3 municipalities that are also going to be adding on a marijuana tax. So when you look at these different levels of government, it is certainly going to, at some point, trigger driving it back to either the black market or people growing it in their basement, their backyard, somewhere. They'll find another way. So,
Right.
okay. All right. So going on to the other two statewide issues, in which both of these I do support. And we'll start with the one that there seems to be a little more confusion about, and that's Amendment 78. So again, this was citizen initiated. So people went out, got signatures to get this on the ballot. None of these three issues are referred by the General Assembly to us. They were generated by citizens, which is not an easy process. And I know you know that personally, but with 78, what that does is, first of all, should note that why are some of these propositions and why are some amendments? Well, like the LEAP one, 119, that's a statutory change versus Amendment 78, why the name 78 or amendment, it's a constitutional amendment. And there are certain reasons you want something in the Constitution. One is if you perhaps, there's certain things that are appropriate to be there. And also for reasons that we may not even have to explain, we don't want the legislature to, over a 4 or 5 day period, tweak that and reverse what the voters have put in. Same reason we have the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights in our Constitution. The legislature can't just within a 1 week period say, yeah, we're going to just change that a little bit. So Amendment 78, what it deals with is there are pools of money that either go to, say, the governor's office, Polis, right now, or perhaps the attorney general for the state of Colorado. They receive funds in, and they're termed custodial funds. Now, an example would be the COVID money. And an example with the attorney general's office might be that there's a large legal settlement, and that pool of money is considered, again, custodial. Right now, as it stands, Polis or the attorney general, as the examples, take that money and spend it as they wish. There's really nothing that you or I get involved with in that process. Where's the money going to go? What is the public hearing so that people can speak up, ask questions? The money just gets spent. So what Amendment 78 does is says those custodial funds will now be moved into the General Assembly process. They'll be going through the Joint Budget Committee. Instead of it just happening down in Polis's office where the check gets written to whoever it is, or the Attorney General saying, I want to go spend it on this, it will go through that normal process where the Joint Budget Committee, or JBC, determines who is going to benefit from this money, which fund are we going to spend it on. And then there's a public process where over, I don't know, you've been down at the Capitol, it's a few months. It's not a quick 1 week process. It's a huge part of the legislative session. It's just determining where is the long bill or the money going to go. And the citizens have a right to an opportunity to testify. So it moves all of that custodial money into that public process. Now, there is a question as to why in this language does it say that this money will not fall under Article 10, Section 20 of the Constitution? It won't fall under those spending limitations or the revenue caps. And what that's referring to is Article 10, Section 20 is our Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, where we, the citizens, put in a constitutional amendment back in 1992 that said, the government in Colorado, both state and local, only gets to grow by a formula. And at the state level, that is population plus inflation, which is a very reasonable and moderate way for government to be allowed to grow. Because prior to that, government was growing like a roller coaster while, I'm trying to make this flat, while the economy was on a flat level, and that's not sustainable. So what it is saying by it won't fall under Tabor is it doesn't fall under those caps. So it's a fund outside of that. Well, the truth of it is these funds are already outside of Tabor. So we're not changing anything in 78. It's simply stating that we're moving it into the general process, but even there, it would just stay outside of the Tabor cap because we really can't change it. That's actually language in Tabor. It says federal funds, grants, legal settlements, those are not within Tabor anyway. So it's not a contradiction to what we put into place. And so therefore, I'm all about public transparency. You mentioned that I got the Vern Bickle Award for grassroots leadership. Well, that had to do with more transparency in government. And that's really what this custodial fund move is it's more transparency. It sheds a light, the sunshine, which is a good disinfectant on where's that money going. So now I'll move on to the next one, or unless you have any questions.
No, I think Amendment 78 sounds like it's a great plan. I think it's a great idea. Can you talk a little bit about the people who, I know you were involved with some of it, but the people who organized the petition process, the citizen-led initiative process, who's behind this amendment?
Sure. So in Colorado, for when there's a citizen initiative, there are 2 representatives who are designated, and the 2 representatives take this through the whole initiative through the whole process. And that means getting the language set, getting the circulation of the petition started. And so those 2 people with this Amendment 78 is Michael Fields with Colorado Rising Action. And we have, in terms of freedom, we have Michael, we have to give Michael a lot of thanks. This is not the first issue that he has worked on. He has done others that are very pro-freedom, pro-citizen, a very strong supporter of the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. The other person listed on there is, many people might know her as Suzanne Stayard, but now her last name is Tahari, I believe. And she actually used to work for the Secretary of State's office in the election department. She was part of the title board. And she actually had run for office, but also a liberty advocate. So those are the 2 people in Amendment 78 who crafted it up, drew up the language, put it into the process, got it out on the street, and successfully got nearly 200,000 signatures to get it on the ballot. And I'll just note that I don't want to say we're lucky here in Colorado, but we are blessed, what might be a better word, that we have the right to initiative. There's other states that don't have this, so you depend totally on your legislature, and God knows what our lives would be like if we only had that to count on.
Right. Yeah, God forbid. Very thankful, very fortunate that we have this citizen initiative process. What's the difference between the amount of signatures needed for an amendment to this state constitution versus just a proposition or just a statutory change?
Thank you for bringing that up. Up until a few years ago, there really wasn't a great amount of difference, but very big special interest groups and government decided to make it harder to get a constitutional amendment in. So the challenge now, since that passed, is that in each Senate district, you need to have, I believe it's 2% of the signatures from each senatorial district. That makes it really a challenge when you look at the metro area. Great, we can get that done. But when you get into the rural areas, figuring out which signature is what is not so easy. There's a lot of people may not even know what's the number of your senatorial district. There's a lot of people wouldn't know that. It's not filled out on the petition initiative. In addition, it needs 55% to pass versus 50% plus 1, like a proposition. They called it was really an attack on our right to petition, and both the left, the right, the hardcore activists who really get things done, they know you just don't go down and get signatures in a week. It's a hard process that takes months. So when they had all of these very big bond companies and the folks who really they're sitting at the trough of government, basically feeding on the pork, they were the ones also funding that drive to make it harder to get something on the ballot and get the passage. So pretty sad, but it was an attack on grassroots. And just to get something on the ballot right now, you're looking at $500,000 just to get the signatures. We always need more volunteers. We have to depend on a certain amount of paid circulators. That's been the way for a long time. But all of these different little cuts into our freedom make it much more harder. And that's all in Article 5 of our Colorado Constitution, that we have this power. And it's sad to see that some people fell for it and made it harder. So back to, that's what they got to get. We got to get a higher vote of yay or yes on it. And then there was also the senatorial aspect. There's a legal challenge, I believe, still in the works. Whenever the state of Colorado has tried to, and I haven't followed up on it recently because this court process is really slow. But there is a legal challenge to it. And in many cases, when the state, the politicians have attacked our right to petition, it ultimately gets overturned because the courts do realize. Wow. So we can be maybe hopeful that in the future, something will change, but right now we have to deal with what we have.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Yeah, it clarifies a lot. And even more impressive that Amendment 78 is on the ballot, and even more important that it gets passed.
Yes. And I hear the big dogs, the ones at the trough, are fighting this pretty hard. They're doing quite a bit of advertising. I haven't looked at the campaign finance, but I wouldn't be surprised if it tunes into millions of dollars.
They're getting that special stimulus money from the government, and they're receiving the benefits of it, and they don't want anybody messing with that, I guess.
Yes. All right, so Go on to the next one now, and I'm very much a big fan of this one. And this is Proposition 120. So this is a statutory change. So it will only take it. We didn't have to deal with the signatures from certain districts, and it will just come down to 50% plus one. And what Proposition 120 does, and initiated by the citizens, is summed up in property tax relief. Colorado, like many of us know, has seen property values jump over the years. And not only does this affect you if you own a property, but it affects you if you rent a property. Because when the government determines what your property is valued at, the reason the government is even involved in that process is because it sets your property taxes based off what your valuation is. So sadly, as some people realize, even though you pay off your mortgage, do your good deed and don't eat out and do all these things and pay off your mortgage early, you still don't really own your home. The government still has that bill that you've got to pay every year called property taxes. So while it's nice to see property values jump, the problem is your property taxes do too. And if you're living on some sort of a fixed income, or like many families with a tight budget, it gets to be where making home housing affordable, part of what you have to consider is the taxes themselves. And if you don't pay them, of course, eventually you lose your home. It goes to a tax lien sale. It's not an option. It's not that you just get to sit there and the bill keeps piling up. I mean, they'll sell those tax liens off, and somebody could actually take that property once the tax liens have gone through the 3-year process. So with these exploding property values, the taxes also explode. And what we've been seeing is double-digit increases. And the simple matter is that most people are not seeing a double-digit increase in their wages. So these taxes are far outpacing what wages are. Proposition 120, as written when we took it out on the street, and I'll go to the sponsors in a minute. When we took it to the street, what it was giving was a 9% property tax reduction across the board. If you owned a commercial property, single family residential, multifamily housing, agriculture, it was fair tax cut across the board. And it's needed. Many people don't know. I mean, they get their property valuation in May and they would say, oh, wow, look at that. Our house jumped up $100,000. Not always do they connect that with what the property tax bill is going to come. And that's the case right now, because that bill is going to come in January, in a few months here. That's when there's going to be sticker shock. So we hit the street with it. People were thrilled to sign it. We got close to 200,000 signatures, 193,000 signatures. And people were very appreciative of it. There are a few people that, well, what's the government going to do if we cut taxes? Well, let's go back to those percentages again. If you have a 15% increase in your taxes and you're getting 9% relief, the government's still getting more money. You're just getting some relief out of it. Let me jump to the sponsors real quick. This is again Colorado Rising Action, headed up by Michael Fields and also Suzanne Stair. So they both sponsored both of these. Transparency, property tax relief. That's our thanks goes to them for heading this up. Jumping into why is there some to Article 10, Section 20 language? Again, that's the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights language in there. Why is that there? Colorado voters decided to use part of taxpayer money or exempt part of the money for the homestead senior property tax exemption here in Colorado. That was a voter approved mechanism to provide relief for seniors in their property taxes. Summed up, it means the first $100,000 of your property's valuation is exempt from property taxes. And so when a senior goes to pay that, and there's certain rules to apply for it, like you have to have been there 10 years. And what occurs is you don't have to pay that property tax to the county and to everybody on your property tax bill. But what happens is the state of Colorado backfills that money to the county, the city, the fire department, so they're made whole. So when you see in here in this property tax relief that there's, I believe it's $25 million that falls outside of the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, it doesn't get refunded to us, and we'll go into that after if we have time. That's because the voters had already approved that relief for seniors. And so it's just making sure that we didn't have any argument as if we have property tax relief, are the seniors going to get shortchanged? Because there's a lot of seniors on fixed income, and they really do depend on that relief that's been present for a while. So, got any questions on that one?
Just going to the Senate bill probably that was passed. So from what I heard, the way I heard the story is, so the legislature was still in session. This initiative was starting to get circulated. It was out in the community, and there was a challenge to it, I guess, a legal challenge that some people went to court to try and stop this initiative from going forward. And the court ruled in favor of the people behind the initiative, and it continued. And I heard within a week, the state legislature introduced legislation to basically weaken this proposition, weaken this initiative, and try and kind of subvert it a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So there was a Senate bill, and yes, it took about a week from start to finish. What this bill did is, first of all, in the property tax relief initiative as written, it provides about $1 billion in relief to all of Colorado with that fair 9% reduction. The state legislature, and there were some members from both sides of parties, although I'll say the Democrats were definitely the driving force. There were a couple Republicans who jumped on board. And what it did was the legislation said only certain properties will get this tax relief. So it took, in dollar figures, a $1 billion tax relief and reduced it down to $200 million. It also, what they did was, in Colorado, prior to that, and because the initiative was written on this, we have residential property and then non-residential property. The non-residential property really brings in all of the other things: agriculture, commercial, industrial, all these different categories. But residential was all just one category. Well, the legislature decided what we're going to do to kneecap this initiative is we're going to change the property classes. And they said multifamily housing will now be a different classification than single family residential. And they created different classes within what used to be a very simple system. And ultimately, the way they have it written now under law is the only people who will benefit from the property tax relief on the ballot is if you own multifamily housing or if you own lodging property. Now, Chris Hansen, a state senator, actually had the guts to say that a single family residential property creates more demand on public services than multifamily housing.
Wow.
Which personally, as a single family residential owner, who I can't think of the last time I've even called for public service, I find to be insulting. I find it to be discrimination to say that I don't get property tax relief because I don't have a high density property. I know how it works. I know the amount of police calls that can go to a high density development versus single family residential. What they wanted to do was they simply wanted to reduce the amount of property tax relief and cut us out of the picture. So what will occur now? First of all, we need everybody to vote yes on Proposition 120, because after we get this passed, Michael Fields with Colorado Rising Action will be suing the state of Colorado to get it back to the intent of what we hit the street with for property tax relief for everybody. What should be noted, and I was going to, bring it up, but is the fact that there was really only one, just as a reminder, only one reason they ran that through. They knew we needed property tax relief, but they didn't want to see $1 billion going to all of us. And we're going to depend, unfortunately, on the judicial system for a fair ruling on this. But at the end of the day, Michael Fields and Suzanne Stair couldn't go back and say, well, just change the initiative language real quick. We'll keep getting signatures. That's not the way it works. It takes months to get the initiative lined up before you can even go out on the street and get signatures. We would have to start this process all over again. So I don't know which judge will hear this, whether we'll get a fair hearing, but the more yes votes, that more heavily weighted is showing citizens support this, really the more evidence that here's what the citizens want, not what those legislators jammed through in 1 week, whereas this took months to get on the ballot.
Wow. Well, the evil at the state capitol never ceases to surprise me. Chris Hansen's one of the biggest idiots down there, and I hope everybody who owns a single family home realizes that he is an enemy of homeowners basically across the state of Colorado. And yeah, this is just another example of the legislature trying to subvert our representative system of government and try and take away money that doesn't belong to them and prevent people from staying in their homes, especially people on fixed incomes. So I really hope this one passes with a wide margin. Taxation is theft, and this is a great way to return that stolen money back to the people who it deserves to belong to, the homeowners and the property owners and the renters and everybody out there who work so hard for their paycheck, and then to see the state legislature just try and hijack it's disgusting. So really hope this one passes with a wide margin.
Yeah, and let's go just quickly back to when we're seeing double-digit increases year after year in those valuations, which means double-digit in taxes, and then this moderate 9% reduction is there. Again, the government was going to be getting more money. It's just never for them, never enough. There is no amount that will fill the appetite. So anyway, so going back to one last thing that I did want to cover, and that is, we've talked about the statewide issues, but wanted to talk about local issues for a moment, and that keeping an eye out for what I call the red flag with ballot issues. Now, I've talked about how Amendment 78 and Proposition 120 have the Tabor language in there. But one thing that many people aren't aware of, and I just did an op-ed for Complete Colorado about this, is the red flag of there's language in almost everyone I've seen for any tax hike at a local level. If the voter sees language that says the revenue from this tax hike will not fall under the revenue or spending limitations with Article 10, Section 20 of the state constitution. If they see that information in the local issue, like Lakewood's got a marijuana tax hike, and that language is in there. Golden's got one, the language is in there. Westminster got one. It's almost all of them. What is occurring there? Because most people, they don't know what Article 10, Section 20 of the state constitution is, right? They're hustling, trying to figure out what candidate is what. Is it a tax hike? What is this language? There's not a lot of people that get in the weeds and figure it out. The blunt truth of it is, by voting yes, even if you like the tax hike, which I don't know many people that more taxes, but let's just say you happen to be one. What you're doing by voting on anything that says exempting that revenue from Article 10, Section 20 is you've forever given up your right to a refund under the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. And while maybe that fits, whoever's watching, maybe that fits your budget, it's okay to have that higher tax hike, you're also taking away that right from your neighbor, the senior who is struggling down the street. You're also taking it away from a future generation. And the reality is, Taxpayers' Bill of Rights never even offered up that permanent elimination of getting the refund. In the section in Tabor, it refers to 4 years. And what was meant by the author, who is still alive and will tell you this clear as day, it was only meant to allow timeouts of refunds for 4 years. Because to steal choice away from a child or future generation, or even your other neighbors, it's not moral to do that. And so I just wanted to bring that up because there's so many people right now, so many tax increases around Colorado at local level. People should understand what that language means and that they're forever giving up their right to a refund and spending limits on the government. Again, Tabor allows reasonable growth. At the state level, it's population plus inflation. At a local level, it's construction or economic growth. And it allows that as a substitute in the formula so that government can keep growing along with the economy and not be growing rapidly faster because it's just not sustainable. So that's my warning, I guess.
No, that's huge. I'm definitely going to examine my ballot, look for that 1020 language and see if it's in there. That should be a red flag to anybody out there who cares about freedom and wants to keep taxes low and limit the growth of government. And like you said, provide that choice, provide that future for the children and the next generations to come.
Yeah.
So no, very important.
Whoops. I was just going to say, and it's, the point of your show is about freedom, right? And to me, money equals power. And I think the government has enough power. So I'm certainly not going to give them more money.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. I'm going to quote you on that.
Okay.
Well, wonderful, Natalie. I think we covered a wide range of topics. I hope this helps people when they're filling out their ballots over the next couple of weeks. Most people have probably received their ballot by now. So definitely dig in and take a look. And do you just want to recap one last time the three statewide initiatives on there and kind of just recap which are the good for freedom and which is the bad for freedom?
Yes. So Proposition 119 is about expanded learning opportunities. It's a tax increase, taking more money from a limited pool of the population. And so it's giving more money to government. And the bad side, especially bad side of it, is that it's an unelected board who will be overseeing it. And so you're limiting your freedom in multiple ways, less money in your pocket to do with as you wish. And also you're going to be giving it to a board that's unaccountable to you. So you've given away your power also. That's totally anti-freedom. Amendment 78 requires government to take their slush funds right now and put them into a public process, which means you gain power because now you can be part of it. You get to stand there and say, hey, that's a terrible place to spend that money. I'm the taxpayer. I'm your boss. It's not where I want the money to go. So you gain freedom because you get a say in it by voting yes on 78. Proposition 120 provides relief for what is going to be very excessive property tax increases. The more money you have in your pocket, the more choice, the more power that you've got. And instead of people being taxed out of their home, which is totally anti-freedom, it means that it makes housing more affordable. And one of the top complaints that we would see in any community, especially the metro area in Colorado, is a complaint with housing affordability. And if government's part of the problem and you could limit that, that means you get more freedom in your pocket along with more money.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Natalie. I really appreciate your time. I'd love to talk to you again going forward. It's very informative. Thank you for getting on here and talking with me today.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too. Thanks.